Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our Renters Helpline presentation on rent increase. My name is Alexis, and I'm the outreach coordinator for Renters Helpline. And then Virginia is our tenant protection advisor for TPP. Virginia, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you, Alexis. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch our webinar. My name is Virginia Mazariegos, and I'm a tenant advisor here at the Renters Helpline.
Okay, so after the presentation, we will have time to answer any questions you may have. Just to save time, if you could just put your questions in the chat feature of Zoom, and then we will be able to answer your question. Today's presentation, we're first going to go over Renters Helpline and what we do. We're going to talk about rent control statewide and local. We will talk about maximum rent increases, and then the notices that you should receive for rent increase, and then service methods. The Renters Helpline is funded by the City of Sacramento, Sacramento County, Citrus Heights, Elk Grove, Rancho Cordova, and the City of Folsom. We partner with Project Sentinel, which we send all of our fair housing cases over to. We partner with Legal Services of Northern California. So any cases we feel our tenants may have, we refer out to them. And then we are a direct branch underneath Sacramento Self-Help Housing. So what we do at the Renters Helpline is we educate tenants and landlords on their rights and responsibilities. We offer tenant and landlord dispute resolution. So if there is a tenant that is uncomfortable dealing with an issue with their landlord, we can be a liaison and help with that, help resolve the problem. We identify housing discrimination cases. We provide referrals and resources for legal assistance, and we do provide these services in over 200 languages. Some common concerns we see and we get calls on are rent increases, which we will go over today, having repairs made and making sure they're done in a timely manner, and making sure that the rental is a habitable place. We hear a lot about termination of tenancies, evictions, security deposit refunds. So ensuring that the tenant is receiving their security deposit refund within the 21 days, and along with an itemized receipt if requested. We also hear a lot about reasonable accommodations and tenant protections due to COVID-19. So I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Virginia, and she's going to go over rent increase and the Tenant Protection Act.
Yes, thank you. So today we're going to talk about Assembly Bill, or AB 1482, Tenant Protection Act of 2019, and we're also going to talk about the Tenant Protection Program for Sacramento. So what is Assembly Bill 1482? It is a statewide rent control law, and it took effect January 1st of 2020, is set to expire January 1st, 2030. This imposes rent caps and non-exempt rental properties in California. It also imposes just cause eviction requirements that apply for residents that have occupied the unit for a certain period of time, which specifically is 12 months plus 1 day, so over a year. These non-fault just cause requirements will apply after that. So what is the rent cap? Well, the maximum annual rent increase what the law says is that it's 5% plus CPI, or commonly known as Consumer Price Index, or 10%, whichever is lowest. So rent cap in Sacramento County is currently 10%. Again, it's 5% plus CPI. And effective August 1st, CPI is 7.7. So currently 7.7 is the CPI. So you have to add the 5 plus the 7.7, which equals more than 10. So that's why the rent cap reads 5% plus CPI or 10%, whichever is lowest, because that is going to be the max that a landlord is going to be able to raise rent in a 12-month period. So for example, between July 1st of 2020 to June 30th of 2021, the maximum rent that a landlord could raise at that time was 6%. That's because our CPI at that time was 1%. So again, you add the 5 plus CPI. In this time period, it was 1. So the max is 6. So for the period of July 1st of 2021 to June 30th of 2022, the cap was 9%. And that's because our CPI was 4. And again, you'd add the 5% plus the 4, and that's where we come up with the 9. So fast forward today, if your landlord wanted to raise your rent and in a 12-month period, they could do so, and the cap would be 10%. Right. So what properties are covered by this assembly bill? So rental units that are 10 years or older, multi-family housing, and some examples of multi-family housing are duplexes, fourplexes, and apartments. Also single-family homes that are owned by corporations, LLCs, or real estate investment trusts. So properties are exempt from the rent cap and the just cause. So these are housing that was built in the last 15 years, single family homes, condos owned by an individual, a duplex, which the owner lives on in one of the units, subsidized or affordable housing, hotels, short-term stay housing, group homes, transitional housing, units subject to stricter local rent ordinances or laws, excuse me. Local rent control. So this is, I mentioned earlier that we would talk about Assembly Bill 1482 and then the city ordinance, which is the Tenant Protection Ordinance and Relief Act. And this ordinance was adopted in 2019. The program was created to assist rental tenants with increasing rental rates by establishing limits on annual rent increases. For longer term tenants, it also provides protection from unwarranted lease terminations. The program helps provide renters in the city of Sacramento with more stability to help them remain in their rental units. Rent increase, month to month versus fixed term lease. Fixed term lease at any time, at the time of renewal. So if it's fixed term, that really there's nothing that the landlord can change at that point, including giving you a rent increase. On a month to month at any time with an appropriate notice. So types of notices that are required. So a 30-day notice is required if the increase is 10% or less. And 90-day notice is required if the increase is greater than 10%. So notices of rent increase must be served either personal delivery or first class mail. If the landlord chooses to mail, they would have to add an extra 5 days for the process of mailing, or 10 days if it's out of state, out of California. Examples of the improper way to serve a notice would be to get a phone call or to get a text message or an email. These are not recognized. So again, I can't stress enough that there are only two ways of your landlord properly serving a rent increase, which again is personal delivery or first-class mail. Okay, so we're going to do an example. And this is our first example. Tenant lives in an apartment complex built in 1960. Tenant is on a fixed term lease and will expire on November 30th of 2002. Monthly rent is $1,200. How much can a landlord increase monthly rent and when? So our answer is the rent cap applies to this unit. So landlord can increase the rent by 10% plus CPI. Since CPI is 7.7, total rent can be increased by 10%. Allowed increase is $120. Fixed term leases rent can be increased at any time of renewal. In this situation, as of December 1st, December 1st, 2022. Tenants rent will be $1,320. All right. And our second example, tenant lives in a privately owned single family house. Tenant is on a month-to-month agreement and pays $1,400 is their monthly rent. Tenant received a 90-day notice with a rent increase of $200. Is the landlord allowed to increase the rent by 2%? Did the tenant receive a proper notice? And the answer is yes. This property is exempt, and the landlord is allowed to increase the rent by $200. So we talked about single family homes being exempt from the Assembly Bill 1482, as well as the tenant protection program, the city ordinance. So yes, it is a proper rent increase, and it was served properly because it's over 10%. A 90-day notice is required. So one thing that I did want to add is that Assembly Bill 1482 and the Tenant Protection Ordinance and Relief Act have some similarities, but at the same time, there are a lot of differences. You know, the most important thing to take away from watching this webinar is that you can call the Renters Helpline. It's a free service. We have a multilingual line, so anyone can call and they could get their questions answered in their language, because it's a lot to remember and there's a lot of moving parts. So again, we'll have all our information on where to contact us. We can be contacted by phone, by email, and also we have a live chat on our website. Any questions?
Awesome, perfect, Virginia. I think we did have a few questions in the chat. The first one was, are duplexes exempt?
So that is a very good question, and it's a very complicated question because there's a lot of moving parts to it. So it depends whether it's a city or county. So depending what year it was built or how old it is, it may or may not be. It also depends how long the tenant has been living in the unit, because the protection kicks in after 12 months plus 1 day. Also, if a tenant has a housing choice voucher, then they would be exempt. So there is, again, a lot of moving parts to that question. And so I would totally call us if you have a specific address. We'd love to hear from you and then give you the appropriate information for your situation.
Awesome. And then